Working the night shift at a cursed radio station, 7 sinister rules exposed that haunt us daily. The clock ticked ominously as Mia slid into the dusty chair of the long-abandoned Millfield Radio Station. Goosebumps prickled on her skin, the eerie atmosphere clawing at her nerves, but she brushed it aside. She needed this job, a means to an end, to pay off those daunting student loans. The walls dripped with old photographs, relics of a vibrant community that once gathered around these airwaves. But now, it was a relic of despair. To anyone else, it was just a fading station enveloped in twilight shadows. To Mia, it felt like a ghost of opportunity, or maybe something darker. In her restless hands, she found a crumpled piece of paper wedged between the desk boards. It was a list labeled 7 Sinister Rules. A chill shot through her as she skimmed the first rule: never play a song for too long past midnight. Her heart raced. Had someone left this as a prank? Yet, something in the air told her this was no joke. Compelled by a mix of intrigue and trepidation, she tacked it beside her desk, oblivious to the danger it heralded. As midnight drew closer, the atmosphere thickened. Static buzzed through the air like a swarm of angry wasps. Mia tried to shake it off, blinking against the growing darkness. But then, without warning, a haunting melody pierced the silence. It was a song tied to the tales of a DJ who vanished years ago. Her breath hitched as late-night listeners called in, sharing unsettling stories, whispers of shadows, flickering lights, and dizzying paranoia. Each word chipped away at her calm, stirring a fear deeply rooted in her gut. She could hear it now, the soft padding of footsteps echoing in the hallway, the creak of the ancient mirrors reflecting more than just her wide-eyed face. Was she losing her mind? Or was something out there? Something sinister? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. A sense of dread slithered through her as a call from a frantic listener knocked her back into reality. You must be careful, Mia. Trust your neighbors, they are not who they seem. The words sent a jolt of icy terror racing down her spine. Her neighbors, who once greeted her with friendly smiles, began to appear different. Their laughter morphed into hushed whispers and unnerved glances. With each tick of the clock, something shifted, vanishing trust and rising fear. The very air felt charged with suffocating tension. When she approached the local police with her concerns, they laughed it off, rolling their eyes as though she were a child telling ghost stories. Yet deep within her, an anger ignited, burning a fierce determination to unearth the truth buried in the dusty archives of the station. As Mia pushed deeper into the chilling reality of the station, she could feel the weight of something watching. The walls seemed to shudder at her resolve, whispers growing with each heartbeat. The connection she feared found its way back to one of her seemingly perfect neighbors, a thread tying her fight for safety to an unspeakable horror lingering just at the edges of her world. In Millfield, nothing was as it seemed, and she was forced to wonder, how do you battle a haunting that seems to stalk from within your own home? Mia's fingers trembled as she pressed the button for the microphone, heart pounding in her chest. The static crackled back to life, and her voice came out unsteady. We're back to our favorite night owls. Whatever you do, don't forget the rules. She glanced at the list pinned beside her. The clock ticked down again, the chilling reminder that time was slipping away. Let us talk about those strange calls, shall we? She said, forcing a laugh. But the laughter that echoed from the speakers sounded hollow, artificial. Her previous courage felt like wisps of fog, disappearing into a brimming chasm of fear. The shadows swirled closer, feasting on her vulnerability. Resolutely, she turned back to the board, hoping the monotony of the broadcast would drown out the eerie ambience. An hour crawled by, as if each second was taunting her reality. Then came another call, this one more urgent, more frantic. Mia, it's me again. The thing your neighbor, Miss Eddings, is hiding, you need to see it. What are you talking about? Her voice cut like a knife, sharp with a mixture of curiosity and dread. What is going on? Just drive by her place, look for the shed in the backyard. Please. The line went dead, swallowed by the heavy silence. Mia stared at the phone, momentarily immobilized. Ms. Eddings? The old woman who always brought cookies to the neighborhood block parties? She eyed the dusty window, half expecting a shadow to cross the moonlit street. The station was a labyrinth, but her curiosity was burning like a fire. What did she find hiding there? With resolve, she rose from her chair, heart pounding in her ears. The chilling disclosure wouldn't let her rest. Grabbing her keys, she peered out the door. The moon bathed the dark streets in a silvery hue, but the air was thick with apprehension. Every crackle of twigs underfoot felt like footprints leading her deeper into the dark maze. Each step brought an unsettling sensation dancing on her spine, a mixture of anxiety and trepidation. As she neared Ms. Eddings' modest house, a flicker of movement caught her attention behind the cracked fence, where the shed loomed like a sinister sentinel. What if she found nothing? Or worse, what if she found something she couldn't comprehend? As Mia crept toward the backyard, the stillness was oppressive, as though the world held its breath. The wind whispered through the trees, but the words were lost in its haunting melody. Shadows stretched and contorted, and for a heartbeat, she thought she could hear her name. Carried on the breeze like a malevolent echo, she reached the shed, her heart slamming against her ribs. Goosebumps cascaded down her arms. The wooden door creaked open under her cautious push, revealing darkness that smelled of wet leaves and rust. A splintered floorboard groaned beneath her weight, struggling under the pressure of her discovery. "What are you hiding, Ms. Eddings?" she muttered, stepping in, pulse racing. The interior was worse than she imagined, a haphazard collection of trinkets, old radios, and someone tied in the far corner. Swallowed by shadows, a figure stirred. "Help me," it whispered, voice feeble yet laced with desperation. Mia's breath caught in her throat. This was more than just tangled cords and dust. Was it a trap? Fear surged back to life, coursing through her veins. She didn't recognize the figure, but a terrible realization washed over her. Was this what her neighbor had been protecting all along? The clock struck midnight, its chime echoing with finality in the dark. The air thickened, suffocating. In that moment, Mia's last thread of defiance snapped. She turned to run, but the exit was no longer behind her. The door slammed shut, sealing her fate, and the shadows began to whisper in sinister chorus. What had she awakened in the shed? What secrets lay trapped within the darkness? With every heartbeat promising a dread revelation, Mia realized it was only the beginning. Panic engulfed Mia as she backed away from the now-locked door. The dim light barely illuminated the shed's disarray, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to stretch toward her. The whispers grew louder, filling her head with a cacophony of voices, all calling her name. "Mia, help us, save us." Fear tightened in her chest, her mind racing. The figure in the corner began to take form, and she could see now the ropes binding the silhouette were frayed, worn down by struggle. "Please don't leave me," it croaked, barely more than a breath. "Who are you?" she managed to squeak out, voice shaking. But the figure only continued to thrash, its desperation cutting into her clarity. Another moment of hesitation, and the darkness around her seemed to pulse, waiting, hungry. Then, she remembered the list of rules she had recited on air. One line struck her like lightning: never enter the darkness alone. How could she have been so foolish? The realization clawed at her mind just as the whispers crescendoed into a roar. She turned to the door, pounding on it, calling for help. "Let me out! Let me out!" Each thud felt like a drumbeat of despair reverberating through her body, drowning out the ominous murmurs. A moment later, silence fell, heavy and suffocating that it felt like an eternity before she glimpsed a crack of light as the door wound itself open slowly, revealing a figure. Her heart raced again, terror and hope wrestling within her. Mia. It was her colleague, Frank, standing cold and still in the threshold, his face pale and drawn. "We need to go now?" "Did you find?" she began, but he interrupted, his eyes wide with urgency. "Just follow me. We can't linger." Without question, she rushed toward him. But as they turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of the figure again, the desperation in those eyes merging with shadows, begging. Time slowed. "Wait, we can't leave it. Are you out of your mind?" Frank hissed, pulling her back. "It's a trap. You heard the rules." Mia's pulse quickened as the burden of choice fell upon her. What if that figure was the key to understanding the horrors lurking in the station? But was it worth the risk? The silence beyond the door felt thick enough to choke her. "What are you waiting for?" Frank urged, his voice slicing through her indecision. "We have to go now." The shed itself seemed to wail in protest as she hesitated. But suddenly, the walls shivered, and the darkness seemed to ripple as if it had a mind of its own. The whispers grew frantic, filling her senses. "Help us, please." Mia's heart was torn apart by fear and empathy. "I can't just leave it," she cried out, and before Frank could respond, she bolted toward the figure, belief and dread colliding inside her. The shadows rushed forward, wrapping around her like icy tendrils. "Mia!" Frank yelled, rushing toward her. Just as she reached the figure, a shriek echoed through the air, a sound that clawed at her very soul. The darkness thickened, swallowing her as she felt hands clasping around her ankles, dragging her into the abyss. "Mia!" Frank's voice faded into the whirlwind of fear. In that moment of utter helplessness, Mia understood the final rule: darkness has a price. But this time, she wasn't sure if she could afford to pay it. The last thing she glimpsed before being enveloped was that pleading face, caught between despair and something much darker. Did she just make their nightmare her own? The shed quaked as if responding to her decision, the whispered voices escalating into a chilling crescendo that rang in her ears. And as she finally surrendered to the shadows, a chilling realization anchored in her mind. The clock was still ticking. What sacrifices awaited her in the dark? What truths were still hidden beneath layers of betrayal and fear? The cold darkness wrapped around Mia like an old, familiar blanket, suffocating and heavy. Choked cries filled her ears as she fell deeper, not into a void, but into a living nightmare. She couldn't tell where her body ended and the shadows began. For a second, she thought she might drown in despair, the weight pulling her down relentlessly. Then she heard it, an echoing, desperate wail that sliced through the darkness. "Mia, help us!" The voice was now layered, twisting into a grotesque harmony that sent shivers racing down her spine. Not just one voice anymore, many, all circling around her. They weren't just whispering, they were begging. The walls felt alive, shifting and pulsing with something dark and ancient. Mia stifled a scream, panic flooding her senses. "Get away from me!" she shouted into the void, but her voice just swallowed up into the cacophony. In her mind, she could still see the figure, the hands reaching out, desperate for release. Silence draped over her for a heartbeat. Then she was falling until she landed with a thud on icy concrete. Gasping, she pushed herself up. Cold air stung her skin, but it was different now. She blinked, adjusting to the dim light of the room. She was no longer in the shed. Instead, she found herself in a linoleum-floored corridor, peeling paint on the walls revealing snippets of what was clearly once vibrant colors. The corridor stretched infinitely, illuminated by flickering overhead lights that buzzed sporadically. "Frank!" she cried, but the shout hung in the air, dissolving into the thick silence surrounding her. Something shifted in the corner of her vision. Mia turned sharply, her heart racing as she spotted a door slightly ajar down the corridor. A faint glow pulsed from within, a beacon luring her closer. She felt drawn to it, like a moth to flame, but with each step, the whispers grew louder, coating her thoughts in dread. "Save us, don't leave!" The words intertwined, clawing at her mind, clawing deeper. She could feel their pain, tangible, heavy. It wrapped around her throat as she reached the door. Taking a deep breath, she swung it open. The room inside was filled with screens lined along the walls, all flickering with static, images of a broadcast from another time. A vintage radio sat on the desk, the dial turned to a frequency lost to the world, but the sound it emitted was chilling, faint cries, screams blending with the static. It made her skin crawl. Mia stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind her, echoing like a gunshot. Panic shot through her veins. "No, let me out." She slammed her palms against the door, but it felt solid, unyielding. "Why did you come?" A voice suddenly questioned, deep and gravelly, resonating from the radio. Mia froze, dread pooling in her stomach. Who are you?" she stammered, her voice shaking. The radio crackled loudly, a sinister laughter following. "You've crossed a boundary here. Shadows tell stories, and those who listen must pay." A shiver coursed through her. She realized then, She wasn't just a passing visitor. She had walked into something more sinister than she could comprehend. I need to leave. I didn't mean to too late. The voice taunted, cutting through her plea like a knife. You've already begun an exchange. To uncover their truth, you might just uncover your own doom. The lights flickered more violently now, shadows dancing menacingly against the walls. The walls seemed to close in on her, urging her to remember. Just then, she saw a reflection in the screen. A face half shrouded in shadow, eyes wide with despair, looking back at her. Mia staggered backward in recognition. No, it can't be not you. The reflection smiled grimly as the radio hissed. Welcome home, Mia. What will you sacrifice to set them free? Mia's heart thundered in her chest. The walls rattled as whispers crescendoed into a frantic pitch, urging her, taunting her. She had to make a choice, one that could either save them or condemn her forever. What truth lay hidden behind the flickering screens? How far would she go to unravel the horror that gripped the station? The weight of the voice echoed in Mia's mind as her heart raced. What will you sacrifice to set them free? What a horrific question. She glanced back at the screens, their static-filled images twisting, revealing shadows of those once lost. She swallowed hard. I'll do anything, she shouted, more out of desperation than conviction. But as the words left her lips, a cold certainty settled in. The radio crackled once more, the laughter now more sinister, more predatory. You should be careful what you promise, Mia. Not all truths come without a cost. The screens flickered wildly, revealing faces contorted in anguish. They reached out from the static, fingers stretching toward her, their mouths opening in silent screams. She recoiled, the abject horror sinking in. Their despair tugged at her, pulling her closer to the edge of sanity. Please, she cried, dropping to her knees, hands clasped in front of her. Tell me what you want. Just let them go. The radio hummed ominously before a new voice emerged, softer yet somehow more frightening. To set them free, you must embrace what you dread most. Your greatest fear. Mia montage scenes raced through her mind. Memories of abandoned structures, haunting silhouettes lurking in the corners. The boy who cried out in the night, his bloody hands reaching for her. Those moments of vulnerability crashed into her like waves, threatening to swallow her whole. Fear, that's all it takes? She whispered, uncertainty filling her voice. I can face it. A low, throaty chuckle filled the room. You think you know fear? Step away from Solstice and into the abyss, face it, and you shall uncover a door that has long remained closed. Only then will you learn the truth. Mia's breath quickened. The shadows deepened, whispering a dark taunt. Embrace it, embrace the darkness. Something shifted deep within her. A sharp pang of rebellion ignited. The faces on the screens pleaded, their horror sparking an undeniable courage. No, I won't succumb to this. With every ounce of strength, she stood up, determined. But then, the lights flickered violently again. A deafening roar erupted from the radio, drowning out her thoughts. She felt the air thicken, the shadows crawling closer, lapping at her feet like hungry animals. Do you think you can resist? The voice echoed. Every soul here is forever entwined with your own. Face your fear and be reborn, or remain trapped in their nightmare for eternity. The screens shifted, revealing an old photograph that made her gasp. It was of her childhood home, the one she thought she had escaped. A time when her family had fallen into despair, whispering dark secrets to the walls. Tears blurred her vision. No, I want to go back there. Too late. Mia, the radio hissed. You already have, and now, the past awaits. The room twisted around her. She stumbled, dizziness spiraling in on itself as the walls fell inward. Her surroundings morphed, darkening until she saw fleeting glimpses of her childhood home flickering around her, the peeling wallpaper, the creaking floorboards, echoes of laughter that turned to screams. Mia, come home, a voice called from the shadows, soft yet sinister, laced with longing. With no way to return, the familiar dread washed over her like a wave of ice water. Was the past truly her greatest fear? Or was what had remained hidden in the darkness of her memory more horrifying than she had imagined? The air crackled, and a door materialized in front of her, shuddering as if alive. Only one way out, the radio recited mechanically. Will you step through? Mia hesitated. The darkness pulled at her, promising answers mixed with damnation. Before she could decipher her actions, an unseen force pushed her toward the door, and as she neared, whispers filled the air again, frantic and desperate. "Help us! Free us!" She swallowed hard, her mind racing. How deep into the abyss was she willing to go? With a trembling hand, she reached for the doorknob. What awaited her behind it? Just as her fingers brushed the cold metal, a chilling thought pierced her mind. What if the truth was far worse than the horror she lived in now? The door swung open. The door swung open, revealing a swirling tunnel of pitch-black darkness. It seemed to breathe alive and shifting, pulling her in with an unseen force. The air smelled musty, carrying the weight of forgotten sorrows, as if every breath would draw in a piece of someone else's anguish. Mia stepped through, her heart pounding violently against her chest. She was surrounded by a cacophony of whispers, ghostly voices intertwining, overlapping. "Help us! Find us! Remember!" Each cry echoed the torment she had heard on the screens moments before, and she felt overrun by their desperation. The darkness wrapped around her, thick and oppressive. In the distance, a flicker of light pulsed like a heartbeat, drawing her deeper into the void. She stumbled forward, her feet scraping against rough ground. Longing to flee, but longing to help pushed her further in. The walls pulsed alongside the flickering light, almost alive, as if they were mourning the traumas they had witnessed. Mia's thoughts raced back to her childhood, the home she had run from, the secrets buried beneath the stairs, hiding in the walls. Memories began to replay in her mind. Her father's rage, the nights spent tiptoeing past the living room, listening to her parents' drunken fights as shadows danced on the walls. Suddenly, the whispers changed tone, becoming sharp and demanding. "You must confront them, Mia. Face the darkness within you." The flickering light grew stronger, revealing a room she recognized. The living room of her childhood home, dusty and stained, yet eerily familiar. The wallpaper was peeling in the corners, and the furniture was shrouded in fabric that had grown fragile over the years. There was a feeling of dread that hovered, settling like thick smoke. "Why are you here?" A voice emerged, hollow and broken. It was her mother, a shade of who she once was, standing in the doorway. Her eyes were wide, begging, yet terror twisted at her features. "You don't belong here. Leave now before they find you." "Who?" Mia whispered, a chill racing through her. But her mother remained mute, lips moving as if trying to speak something hidden. Shadows loomed behind her, unwelcome and dark. They crawled forward, clawing for Mia, rasping hoarse, desperate pleas. "Help us, remember." Mia's heart pounded louder, drowning out the sounds around her. She wanted to retreat, to escape the horror this place birthed within her. But with every ounce of will, she stood her ground. "I refuse to be a prisoner of your past." The shadows recoiled, momentarily stunned. Then, the air erupted with their howls, a fusion of despair and rage. It felt as if the very fabric of reality trembled, as if the space around her was shattering under the weight of untold stories. "Mia, stay with us," a voice whispered, seductive and slow, pricking her ears like needles. Clutching her head, she shouted, "No, I will not be trapped here." The figure of her mother twisted, as if caught in a storm, morphing into a shadowy figure with glowing eyes. "What will you choose, child? The past or your sanity?" The shadows surged forward, engulfing her in a grip that felt cold and suffocating. Mia realized that this was the confrontation she had avoided all her life. This was her moment to either reclaim her power or succumb to madness. Just as the shadows threatened to swallow her whole, a brilliant flash of light exploded, breaking the dark chains tightening around her. Mia fought back, shifting between fear and a flickering hope, a hope that whispered she might find a way to save them. But as the light dimmed, a chilling laugh echoed around her, taunting her fragile resolve. "You think this is over? You have merely begun to peel back the layers. And the darkness will always be waiting." What had she uncovered? Had she really stepped up to her fear, or simply activated something deeper? Mia held her breath, realizing she had no idea what lay ahead, but she couldn't escape now. As her surroundings faded into the black, the final question clung to her like a breath on her neck. What if the atrocities were only beginning? The darkness swallowed her again, and just when Mia thought she had escaped, she found herself shifting between familiar rooms. It was like a warped carnival of her memories, where every horrific moment twisted into a sadistic dance. The whispers wrapped around her tightly, squeezing the oxygen from her lungs. "Come back, help us," they implored, voices layered on top of each other, creating a haunting symphony of despair. Suddenly, she was back in the kitchen, the very room where shadows had watched her father break plates during drunken rages. The air smelled acrid, like burnt flesh and old whiskey. Her hands trembled at her sides, but a surge of anger washed over her. "Let me go? This isn't my reality anymore," she cried, each word laced with defiance. From the corner, a shape materialized, dark and flexible, resembling something human yet warped. The figure melted into the frame of the door, mocking her. "You still think you can escape? Huh? You are bound to this place and its horrors. You and your tiny, feeble heart." As Mia's heart raced, the reality around her began to twist again. The walls conspired. They leaned in, as if eager to snatch her back. Her childhood fears, long buried, crawled into her mind, images of her father looming over her mother, fists clenched, rage bubbling over. And now those shadows, the ones so familiar, stood waiting, eager to consume her once more. "Face it, Mia, face the truth," the figure crooned, shifting closer. "You couldn't help them then. You can't now. Why fight it?" "No," she screamed, her voice echoing off the walls like thunder. "I never wanted this. I didn't choose to be here." With every defiant shout, the shadows recoiled slightly, as if her words had power. Mia turned and flung herself down a corridor, filled with the photos of her past lives, moments forever frozen in time. Faces peered out, eyes wide with both joy and terror, captured forever in their most vulnerable states. She felt her resolve floundering, hands shaking, wanting to reach out to touch these specters of happiness. But she couldn't. The darkness behind her hissed, growing louder, more demanding. With each step forward, the darkness clawed at her heels, its icy fingers brushing against her. She could hear her mother's voice again, sharper now, cutting through the air like a jagged blade. "Don't let them win. Not again." The flicker of light reappeared ahead, promising sanctuary. Mia raced toward it, desperation pouring through every ounce of resolve. The closer she got, the brighter the light became, illuminating the faces of the shadows that had once haunted her. They screamed and shrieked, their anguish bending the light into dark silhouettes. Just as Mia reached the threshold, a single shadow lunged, catching her wrist in a vice grip. The air turned cold, and time froze for a beat. "Remember," the voice whispered, impossibly deep and familiar. It was him, the man who had left scars in her soul. "You can't outrun me." Terrified, she yanked herself free, stumbling into the light. But the moment she crossed the boundary, it vanished, leaving her in a new space altogether, one filled with a faint glow and sticky silence. She looked around, disoriented, and realized she was no longer alone. Figures loomed here, their eyes glowing with an ominous brightness, their mouths moving in silent wails. "What have you done?" a voice rasped, dragging her attention to the center of the room. It was her father, but not the man she remembered. This was a twisted version, face contorted in darkness, a reflection of guilt and rage that in that moment, choice and consequence entwined, and the chains of her past threatened to drag her back once more. "Will you run, or will you fight?" he sneered, shadows swirling at his feet like restless phantoms. Mia's heart thudded against her chest, realization striking hard. This was just the beginning. She was no longer running from the past, but towards it. This was the haunted riddle she had to solve. As the shadows writhed at her feet, she couldn't help but wonder, what were they hungry for, and how much of her would they consume to bring the past to life? What awaited her on the other side of this dark confrontation? Panic surged through Mia as her father's blank eyes bore into her. Those hollow sockets were a facade. The real terror lay in the twisted shadow that slowly emerged from behind him. It elongated, stretching impossibly long, tendrils reaching past her father, hungry eyes glinting with malice. The very air thickened with dread, squeezing her throat. "Fight!" Mia echoed, a spark igniting in her chest. "You think I'm afraid of you?" His laugh echoed, hollow and cruel. "What do you know of fear? You've hidden behind it all your life, haven't you?" The shadows twisted closer, creeping along the floor like a rising tide, whispering her secrets, her failures. They're hungry, Mia. Hungry for your regret, your fear. The walls shimmered, morphing into grotesque versions of the past, her mother crying, her father enraged echoes of hopelessness. For a fleeting moment, Mia felt doubt seep in, but she shook it off. I want to be your plaything, she yelled, gathering her strength. With that, she stepped forward, even as her heart pounded like a trapped animal. The figure shivered, astonished by her resolve, but her father just grinned, a dark curl of a smile that twisted the room. Too late, he rasped, a dreadful melody punctuated by the whispering shadows. They started to writhe and twist, moving toward her demanding and insatiable. Watch me, Mia breathed. She made contact with something in the air, a forgotten energy radiating from her very core, lighting up the dark room. The shadows shrieked in fury, recoiling from the light that burst forth from her like a supernova. Fear and anger transitioned into defiance, manifested in a blinding beam that slashed through the shadows. Stop! Her father screamed, but the echo of his voice was swallowed by the purity of her light. It rippled through the darkness like water spilling from a broken dam, dissolving the nightmares that gripped her. For a brief, electrifying moment, she could see their faces, lost souls, reaching for her, yearning for salvation. Help us, they cried, an amalgamation of voices tugging at her heartstrings. She felt them, a part of her she had long buried, clawing back to the surface. But she remained focused on their salvation, not her own. Not now, she shouted back. You're not mine to save. You can't take me. Mia pressed forward, the light intensifying, enveloping her father. With each step, she could feel the shadows dissipate, shriveling like black weeds under harsh sunlight. His rage contorted, the frozen mask morphing into a scream of horror. But just before he vanished entirely, he lunged, gripping her wrist, cold and sharp. You can't run. I will always be here. In a last, desperate bid, Mia thought of the happy memories, the laughter shared, blocking out the horror. Each memory fueled her light, and with a deafening pulse, his grip shattered. The room exploded into brilliant light, but as the brilliance slowed, shadows lingered at the edges, alive and whispering. Breathless and trembling, Mia stumbled back. What have you done? The voices echoed, stirring restlessness. She looked at the wall, the once void now strangely brimming with new echoes, conversations that faded in and out just beyond her reach. Then, she heard it, a soft tapping, persistent, like fingertips drumming. Mia turned, but nothing was there. Her heart raced. The whispers grew frantic. Don't ignore us, they hissed, weaving into her mind. We're waiting for you. As she staggered back, darkness lingered like a heavy fog, and dread curled in her gut. There was something more, something still hot with menace, just beyond the threshold of her courage. What do you want? She demanded, but the shadows only laughed, their discordant harmony echoing back. Suddenly, the glow faded, the sanctuary fracturing, and every light snapped out. A cold silence blanketed her, leaving her utterly alone again. An itch spiked on her neck, and she could feel it, a presence behind her, something lurking, almost playful. Did you think this was over? The voice whispered, sending chills down her spine. Time stood still, and Mia realized with increasing dread this was just the beginning of another battle. But what if she didn't have the strength to fight it a second time? What awaited her just around the corner, where shadows danced merrily, hungry and playful? Mia stood still, heart racing, the chill of darkness wrapping around her like a shroud. Shadows inched closer, their whispers curling around her thoughts like smoke. She squeezed her eyes shut, searching for the light she had conjured before. It flickered at the edges of her memory, taunting her, just out of grasp. Help us, echoed again, but this time it wasn't distant. It was right by her ear, a cold breath that made her skin crawl. She turned slowly, realizing she was not alone. Figures emerged from the darkness, hunched, sorrowful, and shrouded in shadow. Their eyes glimmered, but there was no warmth, only need. They reached out with bony fingers, desperation etched on their faces. Each one was a ghost of regret. Why won't you help us? One wailed, its voice crumbling like dry leaves. Mia shook her head. No, you're not real. You can't take me. The shadows forced their way into her mind, tugging at her fears, her failures, rewinding her life into a reel of disappointments. Images flashed her mother's tear-streaked face, her father's lost laughter, moments of hopelessness that felt eternal. They wrapped around her throat, squeezing until she gasped for air. Every choice you made led to this. A voice murmured from the abyss. Don't you want redemption? Redemption? The word hung in the air, heavy with its implications. She had never stopped to think about what it meant. Maybe she had always wanted it to set things right. The shadows sensed the vulnerability, whispering promises of a bright future if she only accepted their dark embrace. Please, it cooed, imploring her to join them. We can make everything right now, she screamed, her voice cracking as she pulled her hands back to crush the darkness. Suddenly, the shadows halted, as if they were caught off guard. Mia's heart thudded loudly in her ears, but she remembered the light she had created before. With all her might, she envisioned it surging from her again, visualizing it blazing brilliantly. Heat radiated around her as she grasped the energy. With one fluid motion, she thrust her hands forward, creating a blinding barrier of light that surged through the cold, caressing each shadowy figure. Their twisted faces contorted in agony, their pleas morphing into howls of despair as they twisted and shrank under the intensity. But even as they retreated, she felt a new energy creeping through the air. The darkness clung to the edges, languishing a bit before pushing back, less sinister but insistent, whispering promises of solace and longing. Join us, they hissed, seductive and soft, but filled with an agonizing hunger. We know what you seek. Mia shook her head, straining against the noise. I don't want you. Then you will suffer, the presence insisted, its sinister undertone now wrapping around her, tightening like a vice. Laughter fluttered through the darkness. It was her father's voice, taunting her from the depths. You think you can escape this? You are woven into every thread of this place. Panic erupted inside her. Was this truly all a part of her? Was she never meant to break free? The shadows danced in delight, swirling closer. Fighting against despair, she sprinted, seeking an exit, a sanctuary to escape this hell. Each footfall sent tremors rippling through the shadows, each step catalyzing their growth as they leaped toward her. She glanced back and saw the cacophony of twisted faces and teeming shadows behind her. They were no longer just figments of fear, but notes in a haunting symphony chasing her down. Help us, they cried again, weaving their voices into a chilling chorus. With fleeting resolve, she turned back to face the darkness shimmering at the edges. I'm not afraid of you, she bellowed, but her voice trembled, uncertainty gnawing at her confidence. But the shadows only laughed, a deep, low rumble that vibrated through the air. And then, more chilling than anything before, Mia recognized one face amidst the tormented, a face she had buried deep, one that twisted her heart. Don't you want to see me again? It whispered, a familiar longing masked in terror. Mia stopped. The world felt muted, her breath caught in an icy grip. She was at the edge of a new abyss, where answers refused to surface, and the hunger inside the shadows shimmered more than ever. Be careful what you wish for, the figure warned, each word a silken thread pulling her closer to the void. As she wrestled with the darkness closing in, Mia only had one thought: what if the real battle had just begun? What if everything she fought so hard against was only the beginning of an even greater horror lurking just within her reach? Mia stood on the precipice of the unknown, shadows swirling ominously at her feet, whispering sweet nothings of despair. The air around her thickened with tension, and the echo of her father's twisted face still lingered in her mind. Don't you want to see me again? It had asked, and the question gnawed at her, demanding an answer she was terrified to give. The shadows encroached, like a tidal wave poised to crash over her. Mia could feel the chilling depth of their despair wrapped around her mind, creeping in like an uninvited guest. Don't you want redemption? They cooed, their voices intertwining like a serpent ready to strike. Each bruised memory resounded painfully, a vicious reminder that she had a past, a fear buried beneath layers of secrets and anguish. No, you want to take me, she shouted, forcing defiance into her voice. With every ounce of will, she squared her shoulders. This was her moment to reclaim the light she had uncovered within herself. Looking inward, she felt the flickering warmth of that light, urging her to tap into its power. Mia inhaled sharply and thrust her arms forward. I choose to break free, she declared, and with it came a surge of brightness that pierced the oppressive darkness. The shadows recoiled, hissing as the light engulfed them, banishing their clutches away. Within the warmth of her creation, Mia saw their faces twisted in pain, but she didn't falter. You don't own me. I refuse to be a prisoner of my own fears. With each fearless proclamation, fragments of her past shattered like glass. Memories she thought were lost returned vividly. Laughter shared with friends, moments of joy beneath a summer sky, fleeting seconds that reminded her she was more than just an echo of sorrow. They were her truths, her resilience, and with each fragment, she felt stronger. The room around her began to tremble, the shadows shrieking as light pushed them further back. You think you've won? They screeched. You've merely delayed the inevitable. But Mia could see it now. Their fear was just as real as hers. They were reflections of her past, ghosts tangled in her own subservience. What are you scared of? She challenged them, voice unwavering. You've fed off my fear for too long, but I'm not afraid of you anymore. Suddenly, the air convulsed, and the darkness surged forward once more, but this time it was different. Instead of shrinking back, it fought against her light. Ghostly fingers latched onto her wrists, and panic threatened to choke her. They weren't letting go easily. Inside the chaos, a soft voice emerged, mingling with the din a whisper that felt achingly familiar. Mia, remember the strength within you. Her mother's words, a beacon of hope. With it came a flood of memories, warm and vibrant. Though they intertwined with shadows, the love felt pure, anchoring her spirit. I do remember. She screamed against the chaos. And I choose to be brave. The light exploded outward, filling the room with brilliant intensity. Mia felt the warmth envelop her, a protective cocoon fighting back the shadow's grasp. I am not defined by my past. I will rewrite my own story. With one last push, she focused that light, channeling all the emotion she could muster: anger, love, and hope. It burst forth, radiant and triumphant. The shadows howled in pain, the cacophony of sorrow swirling around her fading, eking into the silence. For a moment, there was nothing but her heartbeat and the brilliant glow that enveloped her fully. And then, an eerie stillness settled in the force of her newfound power. The shadows, once menacing, crumbled away like dust scattering in a breeze. The room brightened as shapes of forgotten figures began to emerge from the darkness, their desperate calls for help finally released from tormenting binds. They faded from grotesque distortions to faces woven with gratitude and relief. One by one, their forms began to vanish, their silhouettes shimmering before her eyes. Thank you, they whispered, moving freely, liberated at last. Mia stood amidst the remnants of despair, breathless yet drastically changed. The world around her, the old radio station, felt alive, not as a ghost town, but as a breathing spirit reverberating the echoes of the past that had been silenced. A shimmering light cascaded through the doorway just beyond her, and suddenly, she understood. This was no longer just an escape. It was a passage into a new present, free from the shackles of previous shadows. Mia stepped through the threshold, illuminated by a brilliance she had created, stepping out into the dawn that awaited her. As sunlight spilled through the door, warmth enveloped her like an embrace. She felt lighter, unburdened. Whatever haunted Millfield before, it stays here, she murmured, glancing back at the empty station. With that final breath, she turned forward into the warmth of a new day, her heart filled with the certainty of possibility. Behind her, the radio crackled back to life, a melody of hope echoing gently through the halls, reminding anyone who dared to listen that the darkest nights can lead to the brightest mornings. Now, as we close this chapter, I need you, my friends. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss any of our next exclusive stories that dive deep into the unimaginable. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Together we can grow this community of believers and dreamers. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about Mia's journey and what you think lies ahead for her. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this conclusion. Let us spread the light together.